So, Jose, we want to talk a little bit more about talent management and development. You've got some thoughts, I know, on a standardised and simple process for this. How do we go about it? How do we build a standardised process for talent development?
So, first of all, yes, I'm a big believer in standardizing as much as we possibly can in the organization, and I would say that our approach to talent management is going to be a module of our standardized operating model, which is called Connect Way, right? So, and when you think about talent management, the way I think about it is, and by the way, this is with the help of a very capable people team, right? So it's not just me here who's coming up with these ideas, but it essentially has a number of different stages. First of all, there's the, if you want, the almost monthly informal interaction around objectives and rating against those objectives, right? So when you think about the way that's being done in most organizations now, it's somewhat mechanical. It's sort of a mandatory task, and we want to turn that into an inspirational, recurring monthly communication. I'll talk about that more later, and then. So you've got that monthly interaction, which allows you to keep the pulse on the development of the individual, right? And that then gets fed into a chart that essentially maps consistency of behavior over a longer period of time, right? Because it's not just important to see peak performance in one specific year, it's important to identify who's my high potential going forward. And that high potential, of course, needs to be able to show a large level of resilience and what have you, and you can only measure that over a longer period of time, right? So we go from the heartbeat is what we call it, the heartbeat of the organization, which is those monthly communications, into the long-term consistency assessment. And then the long-term consistency assessment will allow us to identify those who perform consistently or those who exceed, right? And those are what we call the role models of the future. And those role models of the future you will find at the intersection of ability, agility, and ambition, right? And we can talk about that more. And so after we've done all that work, you can now put together a comprehensive talent map. And you can essentially say, okay, this is my human potential, and this is how they rank in the talent map. And you've got, essentially in that talent map, you've got a number of different categories. You've got essentially your role model, but you also have your developing talent that's in the midst of an upward curve but hasn't yet bloomed. You've got your core contributors, and then you've got what we call passengers, who are people who perhaps require some coaching and can probably do more for the company going forward. And then the last aspect is, okay, so you've got your talent map. You also, at the same point in time, have a sort of a succession plan or a succession grid, if you want, which identifies which roles are filled today, which roles will require upgrading in the next 18 months, in the next 2 to 4 years, which core contributors will leave the organization. And so what you now need to do is provide an overlay of the talent map on the succession grid to identify who's well placed to fill which role at what point in time. And all of this, again, within Connect Way, all of this as a standardized approach, but a living, breathing type of approach in a sense, yeah.
I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Because traditionally, certainly in our business, but in others, you'd have a kind of annual or biannual formal review, and it seems to me what you're talking about is a much more simple approach, a much more regular, as you say, heartbeat type approach of informal, relaxed but inspirational conversations that build up into essentially individual KPIs, so that you can monitor and people can monitor their own development.
Yeah. So. From formal to informal, from mandatory to natural, right? From mechanical to inspirational, right? That's that monthly conversation, and everything I've just talked about should be governed by the core overarching principle that we as an organization hold so dear, which is simplicity, right? So that means that we don't want to overload people with objectives. 3 objectives is what we're suggesting, right? And we don't want a complicated rating system. We will have 3 ways of rating the performance against those KPIs, against those, not KPIs, but against those objectives per individual. So very simple. So 3 times 3 if you want, in terms of the monthly heartbeat, right? And then that leads into the long-term talent map. And the long-term talent map, we are measuring 2 things. We're not just measuring the performance of an individual against key KPIs that underlie what that individual is supposed to do, but we're equally measuring, so we've got a two-dimensional sort of matrix, how the individual performs. And the how is essentially adherence to core values. We're a value-driven organization, and how you do something is as important as what you do, right? So what you do is your performance against a balanced scorecard. How you do it is, are you true to the principles of openness, open-mindedness, creativity, speed of decision making? That's fairness. That's what's important as what you do and how you perform against your balanced scorecard.
So from the point of view of the organisation, the big benefits is essentially we're able to engage people, not annually or twice a year, but every single month, focus on their progress, focus on what they're enjoying, focus on how they're performing against the values, and track that all the way through. So it just builds, again, it builds this openness and engagement, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's all about engagement. It's all about the pulse of the organization. It's all about understanding what lives in the organization. By the way, I also want to say that those objectives are not static, right? So as somebody develops throughout the year, right, because you're having these regular interactions, and by the way, they don't have to be in an office environment. You can have them anywhere, right? I mean, you can have them as you're sitting on the tube. For, it doesn't have to be, that's exactly the intention here. It doesn't have to be a formal sort of quote-unquote sit down, if you want, right? But yeah, so as somebody develops, throughout the year, then of course those objectives can also be changed, but always in the spirit of transparency and openness, and always in the spirit of how do we build a sustainably better business, right? That's ultimately what this is all about, right? And how do we make sure that we don't fall or step in the trap of having tremendous talent gaps that we can't fill because we don't have the right succession plan and we don't know which talent we have on board, right?
It's a key challenge for any business is both succession planning and identifying those potential gaps, isn't it, as you go forward. But the other thing that strikes me is how intrinsically linked this is to, as you said at the beginning, to continuous improvement in the Connect way. It's a core part of that because it is fundamentally about the principle, isn't it, of continually improving and developing.
That's exactly it, right? So everything we do needs to be interconnected, needs to tie into the other core initiatives, right? And so, since we have a value that's about creativity, that's about speed of decision making, since we have an operating system that's about continuous improvement, since we have an overarching goal and obligation towards our people, our customers, and our shareholders to build a sustainably better business, right? We have an obligation towards continuous improvement. How do you achieve continuous improvement? You could talk about continuous improvement in terms of processes and procedures inside the warehouses. You can talk about continuous improvement in terms of processes, in terms of the head office functions, but what is our most important asset? It's our people. So this is a methodology, a proven probably methodology, a playful way of approaching the requirement of our people to continually evolve in an ever-evolving and ever more complex business environment.
Excellent. No, it's very interesting. And as you say, bringing it back to the values, it's a much more friendly way of working together as a team, isn't it? It's a much more open, accessible way.
Yeah, absolutely. It is absolutely in support of our core values.
Excellent. Thank you, Jozef.
Thank you.